So here's what he borrows. Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 16 says almost the same thing, only when it finishes the verse, it says that you may prosper or do well in the land that I have given to you. And it had to do with Canaan. So Deuteronomy, the word Deuteronomy means second law. It's not really a second law. It's a repeating of some of the essential major parts of the law as the people of Israel are going into the Canaan land. And so one of the things he does is to rehearse this principle that is going to be true for all disciplines. I mean, you're talking about centuries and centuries ago, but this principle is still true. Children, obey your parents in the Lord. Now, what else is interesting to me about that is that children typically can't read, right? And here's a command to children. But what do you make of that? And the answer is, what you make of it is that parents have got to teach their children to obey. I suppose in my life I've conducted about as many funerals as most average preachers. I sure have been to a lot of them. And I got a call one day when I was living in Collierville, Tennessee, and I do not remember, I think it was the funeral director who called me and said, Mr. Colley, we have an unusual circumstance. A teenager has died, and we need someone to come and conduct the funeral. They don't have a preacher. And the mom said that she had in her past, as a youth, had some connection to the Church of Christ. And that's why I called you, and will you come and conduct this funeral? Now, my policy has always been, I'll always go and conduct a funeral, because you never know when you might be able to help people. You never know when you might make a connection and they would remember you later on and say, can we talk about the Lord? And so I always go and conduct those funerals. So I went. What had happened is that Mason, that was his name, he was about 17 years old, and he was on the wild side. Mason liked to drink and party, and his end came late one night in the wee hours with his friends, his sorry friends. And they were on a desolate road, driving their cars. They'd been drinking, and they were racing, and the front bumper of his car rapidly hit an oak tree. And those friends of his held him out there on the pavement in their arms as he died. And that is what happened. And I went to conduct the funeral. It was a full house. It was a chapel there at the funeral home, but it was full of kids. You can imagine what it was like. And I mean, they lined the walls, and they were all in the foyer, the lobby back in the back. It was a sea of teenagers. And you can imagine the kinds of things I said. I tried to express sympathy, but I also said, now you listen to this old preacher. Don't drink. You've got to stay away from alcohol. And you've got to stay away from illicit drugs. You've got to do that. You've got to do that. And remember that one day you must meet the Almighty God, and you need to be right with God. And that's what I said. And so we went out to the cemetery, and it was out in the country, a beautiful day, and all those kids gathered around. You can imagine the atmosphere. The pallbearers were teenagers, and they were dressed nicely, and they were standing there beside the grave, and I was about to start. Somebody was playing loud music on his hot rod out there, had it cranked up. I was not going to conduct that service until that was turned off. I'm going to tell you that right now. But about to start, and that boy went out there and turned down his radio. And then before I started, a loud, hopped-up car roared past the cemetery. And I thought, oh, he can't know what we're doing here. I don't know who he is, but he'd never do that. He wouldn't have done that. The boy next to me, who was one of the pallbearers, leaned over and said, he's one of the pallbearers. And that was his tribute to the deceased. I just tell you that to tell you this is the atmosphere on that day. When I finished that graveside service, a woman came up to me. I'd never met her. And she said, Brother Colley, do you see that girl over there? And I looked over and she was pointing at a teenager over there. Yes, ma'am? And she said, she's my daughter. She's doing the things that Mason was doing. And I want you to tell me what I can do to keep this from happening to her. Incidentally, those kids had another party planned for that night. And I said a few things to her, but what I would really like to have been able to do is to have her sit in this pew right here for all the sessions of this family seminar. I mean, not because it's me, but because of what I'm teaching. I would like for her to, it was late. I'm telling you, for her, it was late in the game. I encouraged her to do some things. I said, are you a Christian? And she said, yes, Brother Colley, I am. But she said, I don't go anymore. Been a long time. I said, tonight, you get your daughter and you say to her, I'm sorry, I want to apologize for you because I have not been a godly mother to you. You say that to her, and then you say, but this Sunday, this Lord's Day, I'm going to go back and I'm going to be restored, and then I'm going to be a faithful Christian. And then you beg her to come with you. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. There are 5 matters of child rearing that I want to talk about tonight. And frankly, you got the first one yesterday, last evening, matters of knowledge. And we talked about how to conduct a family Bible time each night in your home. And I really appreciate the kind of input that I've gotten from that lesson. And people are doing this or they're going to be doing it. And that's very exciting to me. I made reference to a couple of resources for you. The Kids Sing cards that I talked about, I'm just going to put this up so you can see it. You can access those, West Huntsville Church of Christ, and here's the web address for that. And Apologetics Press, there's the website for the Apologetics Press, and if you need, I'll be happy to do this again later with you to get it. And there's our website. There's some things on there for kids, and we'd be happy for you to do to that. Okay, here we go. Matter number 2. Matters of fidelity. There are 2 issues of life that I believe we ought to emphasize greatly in our children about fidelity, that is, their loyalty. The first one is loyalty naturally to the church, and the second is loyalty to your family. Now, how do you build loyalty in the hearts of our children? How do we put that in them? Well, I would put right there at the top family Bible time. But setting that aside, because we've talked about that, bring your children faithfully to Bible class and worship. Now, I understand that Christianity is made up of more than just coming into the assembly. But listen to this now. Listen to this. One of the greatest, most tangible ways that you teach your children to put the Lord first in their lives is to raise them up and be at the assembly every time the doors are open. Now, you raise them up like, and you raise them up like this, and you're different. I know that you're different. And sometimes what's going to happen is that you have challenges to the assembly. Ezra, my 11-year-old grandson, has signed up for a baseball team. He is so excited. And so I've been taking him out in the yard, and we practice. We practice throwing the ball. He's not very good yet. But he's getting better, and he has a coach who's very patient. I really loved the coach. Went and met him, talked to him. He knows his stuff, and he's a really patient man. But there was another team that Ezra tried to sign up first for, and the problem was they practice on Wednesday nights and on Sundays. And when Ezra heard it, he said, I don't know why they do that. I don't want to play for that team. Well, that made me real proud. Ezra didn't have to come and ask us, could he go play for that team and miss those assemblies, because we weren't going to do that. Now, I'm not minimizing the value of playing baseball. I really like baseball. I love sports. I think it's great for kids. But let me tell you something about your children and my children in baseball or basketball or football. I've been around some professional athletes. I'll tell you that story later. One night, I was kicked by Shaq O'Neal. I'm not going to tell you that story yet. It's true. There's very little chance that your child, and I'm thinking about Ezra right now, very little chance that Ezra is going to go to school on a scholarship with athletics. I haven't told him that yet, but I think that's probably unlikely, probably very unlikely that it will happen. I know that sports are important. I know that homework's important. And sometimes, a family may think, we come to the assembly, we do that. We come all the time, unless, of course, there's a big test. Now, I do understand the logic that time can be used, set aside for the purpose of getting ready for that test, and I think that has merit. I understand that, but I'm going to tell you something. Those kids are going to grow up, and when they grow up and they go to college, can you remember, did you go to college? Some of you did go to college. I remember the first Sunday that I was at Freed Hardeman as a student, and I woke up that morning and I thought, my mother is not here to tell me to get up and go to worship. We went as a family, of course. Nobody made me do it. And it felt so strange because nobody was there to tell me to do it. And I thought, if I don't get up and go, nobody's going to know. It's all about me. I make my own decision about this. And you know what? I tossed that around. And you know what I did? I got dressed and went to worship. That's because you know what? There wasn't anything in me that could stay home from worship. Because it's my life. That was how I grew up. We were always in worship. You know what's going to happen is that your children are going to graduate from college or graduate from tech school, or going to graduate from high school, whatever it is, and launch into life. And if you think right now that the devil is going to have only things at the level of baseball or basketball or band or homework tests, if you think it's just going to be at that level, you're mistaken. They're going to have great challenges to their faith, great real challenges, stressful challenges to stay away from the church. Am I right about that? Yeah, that's the truth. The question is, are they going to have the backbone? Are they going to have the wherewithal to make the right decision, or will they bail? You say, well, is that predictable? I know they're going to be making their own decisions, but I tell you this, there's something that we can do now while they're small. And Christianity is more than just coming to the assembly. I know that. But what a wonderful and tangible way that you instill in the hearts of your boys and girls that we put the Lord first in our house. Let me tell you, God lives at our house, right? And that's how we're going to do it. All right. The second thing is our families. We need to teach them loyalty to the family. You know the kids are getting married later these days? And I know statistically you still have a large percentage of people that just don't get married. They just live together, but they do so against the will of God. God won't have it. But other couples, people are getting married later. Now sometimes it's just because of preference. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no wrong in that. And sometimes though it's sort of a shift in our culture, and you're aware of that. Sometimes it's because they don't wait for sex. Sex is a mighty motivator for people to want to get married. But what if they don't wait for marriage? And so that no longer is often a thing. And sometimes it's because of feminism. And who would say that feminism didn't negatively affect us? Of course it did. As a culture it did. She doesn't need a breadwinner, and he doesn't need a homemaker. That's what we were told. That's just sort of, I don't have to have one. And so I think that did a great deal of damage. A lot of kids came from broken homes. God bless them. And they equate divorce with marriage. And they want nothing to do with it. Too painful. But for whatever reason, I would suggest that the numbers suggest that people get married later in life. What do we do to build fidelity to the family in our children? Dads, always remember that your children spell love T-I-M-E. A few years ago, my son was already preaching, our son was preaching. And he preaches now in Jackson, Tennessee. And I sure do love to hear that boy preach. I really love it. He emails me and he asks me questions sometimes. It's not because he's not smart enough. He knows more than I know. It's just because he's my son. And so he'll say, I'm going to do Q&A. And what do you think about my answers, Dad? Well, I just love that. I just love it. We were at PTP one year. Polishing the Pulpit is a great annual lectureship. A lot of teachers and preachers come together, and it's a wonderful thing. They're very practical, too. And one year, they had a panel of preachers, like the old guys like me, and they had their sons, preachers who have sons who preach. And they put them across the stage, gave them microphones, and somebody was asking them questions. And so they asked the young ones, what did your dad do that you think of? What pops in your mind that really contributed strongly to you wanting to become a preacher? And I thought, this is going to be profoundly theological. And I just can't wait to hear what he has to say. And Caleb was one of the first ones that they pointed to. And Caleb didn't miss a beat. Caleb said, when I was about 11, we lived in Jasper, Alabama, and my father put a basketball goal there at our driveway. And because his office was not far from the church building, he would drive home at lunchtime every day, weather permitting, and we would wolf down our sandwich, and we'd go out and shoot baskets, and we would trash talk. And we did that. That's a three-pointer. It was not. Your foot was on that line. I saw your foot on that line. And it struck me that I wish I could say to you that I played ball with that boy every day. And we did a lot of stuff. I wish I could tell you that I did it with a grander purpose. Now that I'm getting older, I see the purpose, but I did it because I like to be with the boy. It was because I enjoyed being with the boy. That was the truth. You've got to spend time with them. Dads, I know you're busy. Don't get old and regret because you were so busy. You didn't take time. We're talking about fidelity to the family. Moms, I hesitate because what I'm about to say is terribly controversial. But when I say it, there's one demographic, one category of people that just love me. I'm saying it, though, because it's the truth. You need to raise your own children. Titus 2:4 says the older women are to teach the younger women. And there's a list of things that I hope that the older women in this room are doing this, taking every opportunity to teach younger women these principles about family. And one of them in there is to be a keeper at home. And it doesn't mean that she can't leave the house. It does mean that she's a keeper of the home. And you know, sometimes I hear preachers that try to skirt that. And they'll say, what this means is, and what this means is that she's the queen of her home. I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? That is not substantive. What it means is what it says. Now, children know this. You get little babies that are born, and there's a difference between mama and daddy. Is that a true statement? Now, I understand the fact that sometimes things happen, and you can't have both a mom and a dad in the home, but the best circumstance is to have both. And babies know there's a difference. You get your daddy to hold you, and he's hairy, and he has this loud growling voice, and he's rougher. And your mama holds you, and she's got these wonderful pillows on her chest. And if you get hungry, you eat. And babies know, don't they? They understand the difference. And that voice, I know that voice because I can remember that voice when I was in her middle. Same voice, same voice. There is no second best to mama. I've never heard anyone grow old, a woman grow old and say, I wish I hadn't spent so much time with my children. They don't say that. They never say that. But sometimes they say the opposite. I'm not your enemy, I'm your friend. And I do understand that there are circumstances where it cannot be helped. And my prayers go up for that mother. And I don't have to explain to you those kinds of circumstances because you know that's true. I'm not talking about her. And I'm not talking about anybody in this room in particular. I really don't know most of you. I'm just saying that in this discussion of family and fidelity, we've got to teach them to value family. What happens to so many young people today who are in prison is that they didn't get this. They never had this connection to their family. And I'm not saying that everybody goes to prison who doesn't enjoy this. I'm just saying that this is something fundamentally right. It's fundamentally right. Teach your children fidelity to the family. I heard a woman say one time that she has God-given responsibilities to her husband and God-given responsibility to her children. And she said, I would just as soon give my wifely responsibilities to another woman as I would to give my mothering responsibilities to another woman. You chew on that. You can think about that. All right, here's number 3. Matters of discipline. We talked about gentle parenting in an earlier session, so I'm not going to replow that ground. If you haven't heard that, it's recorded, I'm sure, and you can hear that, and that's important to think about. But I want to touch on this. You already know that I'm an advocate of spanking. I think spanking is a great thing because in appropriate measures at appropriate times. But what it says is, what you did was make a bad decision. You knew that it wasn't right, and you chose to do it, and now here's the consequence, and you dust their britches. Now let's go on with our day. And by the way, if you decide that you want to do that some more, I've got some more spanking where that came from, right? Spanking, I think, but now I don't think it's the only thing. Let me make some rules. Can I make some rules about spanking? And really about discipline in general. Here's 3 don'ts. Don't yell at your children. You don't want them to obey you because you're scary and out of control, or they perceive you as being scary and out of control. You want them to obey you because you're mama. You are mama, or you are daddy. And that's that's what you're trying to teach, is a principle of authority. So don't yell at your children. You don't need to yell. I mean, if one of them's going across the highway and a diesel truck is coming, I'm okay. You can yell, but not because you're going to discipline them and you're just frustrated. You will be frustrated. There are going to be times disciplining your children that you're going to be, may I say, fed up. You will. But you're an adult and you need to act like an adult. And don't scream at your children. That's not what you want. That's not what. Don't lie to your children. This principle is applicable in reference to good things and in reference to bad things. So if you tell your boy on Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, I'm taking you fishing, and it comes Friday and about 2:45, you've got a client come in, or somebody that you need to service, or whatever it is, what I'm saying is this is an appointment. It's a very important appointment that you've made with that boy. And what you say to that client is, listen, I really want to take care of your needs. I've got an appointment I must keep. And will you excuse me? And I promise I'll take care of your needs on Monday when I get back. Bob Duncan was a gospel preacher, and he died several years ago. And he was a main mentor in my preaching life. And I really loved him. And I'm still a little upset with him because he died. One day I'll tell him. But Brother Duncan had a daughter, Jill. She still lives and has a family. But I don't remember exactly. She had a little injury. I think it was a cut that required a few stitches. And he was the one to take her to the hospital, took her to the emergency room. And you can imagine that she was in great distress. The nurse said, well, Mr. Duncan, we're going to take her in here and prep her to get her ready for sewing up and whatever. And said, now you wait out here. You can't go in, and we'll take care of this. And he said, no, ma'am, no, I tell you what. I promised her that I would not leave her side, and my credibility is at stake. He went in there. He went in with her because he had told her that. Now, that's also applicable to discipline. If you tell your child, if you do this, I'm going to spank you, you better do it. I had a man in my office one day several years ago, and he had a little girl. I guess she was 5, 6, and while he and I were talking, she was looking at my books, and it wasn't bothering me because she wasn't doing any harm. She was touching them and looking at them. But I noticed that his eyes would dart over every little bit and watch her touching my books. And so he said, honey, don't touch the books. We continued our conversation, and she continued touching the books. I mean, just like he didn't exist. And he turned to her and said, if you don't stop that, I'm going to come spank you. You stop that. I told you, don't touch the books. We continued our conversation, and she continued on just like, and I couldn't hear him anymore after that because I was thinking something's about to happen. And so he turned and looked and realized that she was ignoring him. And what he did then, and this is just as straight as an arrow, he walked over there and picked her up in his arms and came back, and we continued our conversation. I want to ask you a question. Who won? No, stop a second, because what you're thinking is she won, but I know he didn't win, but she didn't win either. She lost something very important, and I'll tell you what else is going to happen. I think it's rather abusive. What's going to happen is that tomorrow he'll be a little more on edge, and he'll tell her the first time, and he'll mean it then, right? Some days he'll mean it, and some days he doesn't mean it. Don't lie to your children. Don't count to your children. If anybody in this room is doing this, I don't know it, so I'm not picking on you, but this is counterproductive. You know what I mean by counting to your children? You go pick up your shoes, put them in the closet, and she just ignores you like you don't exist. And you say, I said to her, 1, 2, you then break into a fraction, 2.5. And maybe she eventually will go put up. Now, why do we do that? What is that about? That's not what you intend to do. No, what you do is that you make sure that she understands you. And if she chooses not to obey, then do her a favor and go dust her britches. Dust her britches. And then say, I told you to pick up the shoes. Now, I want you to go pick up the shoes and put them in the closet. And do it now. Now, she may, sometimes you have a really particularly stubborn one, and you may have to cycle through that a time or two. And now, can you hear me say this again? Because I said it yesterday sometime. Child abuse is from hell, but spanking from loving parents at appropriate times in appropriate measures is from heaven. We're teaching them fidelity to the family. We're teaching them matters of discipline. But spanking isn't the only way. And some of these are very creative. Let me give you a couple of examples. I had a friend where I was preaching one time in Texas. I was in a meeting, I don't remember what exactly we were doing, except that I was there and in their home. And it had a fine little boy, and I really enjoyed getting to meet them. And the father told me this story. He said that his boy, who I think was 5, perhaps 6 at the time, so about that age, really wanted the latest toy, which was, I believe, a laser blaster. And all the boys wanted one. And it was sort of pricey. And so the dad and his little boy went to the toy store during that time to buy a gift for one of his friend's birthday parties. So it put them in the store. An end cap on one of those rows of toys was all dedicated to the laser blasters. And the boy said, Dad, the laser blaster. And he said, please get me one. Please buy me one right now. I'll do anything. And in fact, he said, if you'll buy me one, you don't have to give me another birthday present for the rest of my life. I really want a laser blaster. And Dad said, no, we're not going to get a laser blaster today. We came to get this present for your friend. We're not going to get one today. And the boy had to come apart. That's what we called it in Alabama. He had to come apart there in the store. He went to his knees, the boy did, wailing and saying, I want it, I want it, I want it. Now, how would you react to that? All right. The father went to his knees so he could look the boy in the eye, and he said, I want you to stop crying and hush. I'm going to say something to you. You hush now. And the boy dried it up. That's what my father used to say, dry it up. And the father said this, I'm not going to get you that laser blaster today, and the reason is your grandmother already bought you one. And she's going to give it to you at Christmas time. But because of the way you've behaved today, it's at her house right now under her bed. But because of the way you've behaved today, you're never going to get the laser blaster. I'm going to tell her to take it back to the store because you cannot act like this. Now, do you tell me, son, is there any other toy in this store that you do not want to get for all eternity? Now you say, wow, that was pretty strong. You could have spanked him. I'm not sure you could have done as much good to him as what that daddy did on that occasion. A man by the name of Lehman wrote books about raising kids, and he tells this story about Matthew, who's 4 years old, who gets strapped into his car seat but doesn't like it. And on this particular occasion, he's so mad at his mother, and he wants to hurt her some way because she's making him do this awful thing and get in the car seat. And he shouts, "I hate you." Now, you know that you can't let that go, right? You know that. Because that boy's going to be 16 before you turn around, and you can't let that go. But she decided not to spank him. I don't know, I probably would have stopped the car. But anyway, that's beside the point. My point I'm making is that spanking's not always the way. There are other ways. So she didn't say anything. She just kept driving, then went to the grocery store, got some groceries, went back to the house, and so she's putting up the groceries. And Matthew says, "Mommy, it's time for cookies and milk." Because every day they do that. Every day at that time of the afternoon, or roughly, they have cookies and milk. And she ignores him and keeps walking around, putting up the groceries. And he follows her. "Mommy, it's time for cookies and milk." And she said, "We're not having cookies and milk today." And she goes about her business, ignores him, just turns her back to him, ignores him. And he follows her. "But Mommy, we always have cookies and milk." Because children are creatures of habit. This is what we do. And he's shook. "We always do that." "We're not having cookies and milk today." "Why not, Mommy? Why not?" And she said, "Well, because I don't like the way that you talked to me today. It was very ugly and it hurt. And I didn't appreciate how you talked to me, and we're not going to have cookies and milk today." And then she walked away again, putting up groceries. And he just melted down. He just melted down. And he began to cry, "Mommy, I'm sorry I said that. I'm so sorry I said that." And now she knows it's a teachable moment. And so she stops what she's doing, she put it down, and she went to him and she said, "I don't want you ever to say that to me again. It hurt when you say that. I don't want you to do that ever anymore, evermore. I'm your mama, and you know that I love you." "I know. I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry, Mama." "Well, I forgive you." And she hugs him tight, and she gets up and goes back and starts putting away the groceries. The next thing he does is to go to her and say, "Mama, can we have cookies and milk now?" Now wait a minute. This is the key moment of the whole thing. You know what the answer is? No, we're not having cookies and milk today. I want to ask you a question. Do you suppose that tomorrow that boy was inclined to lash out and say something ugly to his mama? No. James 3:5 says, "The tongue is a little member and boasts great things. Behold how great a matter a little fire kindles." The tongue is a small member of our body, but how serious it can be. The tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So the tongue is among our members, that it defiles the whole body. And listen to this. It sets on fire the course of nature. That means it means the circle of life. And do you know anybody in your life right now who didn't learn how to control his tongue or her tongue early and boasts of saying, "Just what's on my mind"? Now you go ahead and try that in marriage and see how that works out. You try it with your employer and see how it works out. I mean, if you could keep a job, you try it with law enforcement. And sometimes people today are trying it with law enforcement. And you know who really ought to go to jail? Mom and Daddy, who failed to teach those children when they were little. All right, matters of discipline, matters of money. We've got to teach our children about money. The most important thing in this life is not money. You believe that? Okay, let's do a little test. Who's the richest person you know? I mean in money. Who's the wealthiest person you know? Everybody, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, or I'm not going to call on you, but I want you to put that person's, you probably know who that is, put that person's picture in your mind. Got it? Wealthiest person you know. Okay, I've got a picture in my mind. Okay, now here's the second thing. Step away from that. The second thing I want you to do is to answer this question. Who's the happiest person in your life? In the circle of people you know, who's the happiest person you know? Want me to tell you something funny? It's not the same person. Now, what does that tell you? See, because we all sort of believe if we have more money, we'll be happier. Somehow there's an equation there. It works out that way. You had more, you'll be happier. I need to teach my children early that's not true. And I need to teach them to handle money. I need to teach them that we're going to take off the top for God. Now, when they're little, I don't think it's wrong to give them a quarter or a dollar bill or whatever and probably some of you are doing this to put in the plate because you're teaching them a habitual act. Every Lord's Day we give to the Lord. As soon as they start making any money, even little bits of money, they need to start using their money to put in the plate because that's the better lesson. That's the bigger lesson. We need to teach them other things too, don't we? We need to teach them about work. Let your children create little money-making things. You forgive the personal illustrations. It's just my point of reference. That's just what I've got. But Caleb started a trash can business in our neighborhood, and there was a little incline in most of the driveways. And a lot of the people on the street were older people, and so they would have to bring their trash barrel down to the street, and then the next day they'd have to bring it and put it back up, and it was hard. And so Caleb put a necktie on, and got a clipboard, and he was about 12 or maybe 13, and he would go to the doors and knock and say, "I'm Caleb Colley, and my business is called Caleb Can." And for $5 a month, I'll come and get your trash can and bring it down to the street. I'll come the next day and I'll pick up any trash around it and I'll put it back up. $5 a month and I'll bill you. I'll send you an invoice. He would bill them. And people signed up like crazy. Of course they signed up. Who wouldn't do that? And when we would go on a trip, a gospel meeting or a vacation or something, he'd have to hire help. Get one of his, no, he would. He'd hire one of his friends and say, here's my route, and here's what you do. It didn't take long to explain that. You go and you do the trash can. And he would pay them, he would pay them. So it didn't amount to much money, really. But what do you reckon the boy learned? And we helped him. We helped him to do this and to figure it out. And Hannah and her mama would bake bread. Cindy's always loved to bake bread, and so she gives away 98% of it. I don't eat much of it myself, but it's sourdough bread. And so we sat down with Hannah when it came time and said, "Would you like to start a bread business?" "Oh, yeah, that'd be great." "Well, here's how it'll work. Mama and you will go to the store and buy the stuff that you need to make the bread, and Mama will use her money for that. And then you and Mama can bake the bread, and you can take it door to door and sell it. And when you take the money in, then you pay Mama for the things that she bought. And then you can keep the rest for your work." Well, they'd bake bread, and as soon as it came out of the oven, they'd wrap it and put it in her wagon, and walk her door to door, knock on the door. You know what? They would sell it fast. You're not surprised about that, are you? Nobody can decline a $3 loaf of warm bread. You can't decline that. And so it's teaching. You're teaching. Lemonade stands, I think it's a wonderful idea. And you know what they're going to do with the money? From the top, they're going to take it off and put it in the plate and give it to God. You're training them. You're training them. Sometimes your child is going to say, you ought to start a daddy bank account, a daddy account, the daddy bank or granddaddy bank. And you get a little bank book and you could keep a record and you say, "I'm going to pay you this much interest." Now, I don't know what you want to pay. I guess you could make it 10% because that's easy to calculate, but it can add up pretty quick. But pay them interest and explain to them what interest means. If you leave your interest in the daddy bank, your money in the daddy bank, I'll pay you this interest and it'll grow. Is that important for them to learn? Ephesians 4:28 says that let him that stole steal no more, but rather let him labor with his hands that thing which is good, that he may give to him that has not. How do you have money to give to people who need it if you hadn't been saving it? You lay it by, you lay it beside, and then you have it. Teach them about banking. Teach them. There's going to come a time when you're going to tell your son or your daughter that you can or you cannot buy something you want to buy. Caleb came and said, "Dad, I really want some Michael Jordan shoes." And there was a time when that was it, and they cost Kevin $100. A pair cost $100. Now, we bought Caleb shoes. We bought common, generic, sturdy but cheap shoes because the boy's going to outgrow them so fast and wear them out. You know how they run and they play and all of that. And so we just bought generic shoes, but he really wanted some Michael Jordan shoes. And he said, I've been doing the trash can business and I've got $100. And I said, now Caleb, now you know those shoes aren't going to last a terrible amount of time. Do you know that? Oh, I know, Daddy, I know. All right, and we went and bought the shoes. Now, I did that on purpose. I'm not the best dad. I'm not, but I tell you this, I don't know how long it took, it wasn't long, before those shoes all the new had worn off of them, and his toes wanted to stick out the end. And they were goners. And about the same amount of time that our generic shoes would have been. And you know what? From that point on, the generic shoes were just fine with Caleb. They were just fine. And then sometimes what you're going to say is no. Daddy, can I buy these fireworks? It's almost the 4th of July. Well, now, son, how much do you want to spend? All my money. Do you understand that once you shoot those fireworks, they're gone? They're gone. Oh, yeah, I do understand that. And then you're going to say, no, you can't do that. I'm not going to let you do it. And then the child is apt to say, well, Daddy, that money is mine. And that's your cue to make the speech. And the speech goes like this. Honey, you know how much I love you, but God gave you to me, and I own everything that appertains to you. I know I own your nose, and I own your ears. I own your closet and your clothes and your chest of drawers and all the underwear in that chest of drawers. I own your bed and your doorknob. Everything about you I own because God gave you to me. And the answer is no. And I own your money too. It's your money, but I own it. It's mine. I'm your daddy. I'm your daddy. And you're not going to do that. Credit. Mamas and daddies, teach your children how to use credit. And the way it goes is that one day he's going to come and say, I want this toy. How much does it cost? It costs $30. How much money do you have? I've got $15. Well, you're short $15, I think, aren't you? Yes. Would you like me to loan you that money? You know what he's going to say? This instant gratification thing is playing on here. Oh, yes, Daddy. Can we go buy it today? Let's go buy it today, because he's not. And so, you say, well, I'll tell you what, here's what we'll do. Teach him about amortization. And you fill out a page, a paper, put it on the fridge with dates. And what it is that you can pay me back the $15, $1 a week. See, that doesn't sound like much. But do you know what? That's over three months. How long will it take before the newness on that toy has done worn off? How long will it take? Well, not 3 months, I'll tell you that. And what he's going to be stuck with is making payments that are you ready for this? That he hates to make. He hates to give you that $1 every week, but he's got to do it. He can't wait to pay that off so we can take that piece of paper off the refrigerator. Am I right about that? I mean, you know what's going to happen? What's going to happen is that one day he's going to marry some pretty sweet girl, and she's going to come hug your neck because he does not abuse credit. He does not abuse it. He won't do it. He doesn't like to borrow money because that credit burned him when he was a kid. Here's number next. Here's the last one for tonight, and then we're going to stop. Matters of morals. Matters of morals. How does the devil get into your children in reference to their morality? How many parents are there? I know there's some in this room because you've talked to me whose children are adults now and they're not living moral lives. And you hadn't felt pain till you feel that pain. And what do? Find out what your children like to listen to about music. Just remember that you're the mom and you're the daddy. Act like it. Act like it. And so if you want to know about music, this is not going to be hard, but it's going to knock the socks off of you. You type in top 40, current top 40, and then you read the lyrics. Because you can't understand half of what they're saying on those songs. That's true, isn't it? I can't. But you'll read it and you'll know. And then clean the house. You go to their device, whatever they're using, to listen to it and take off everything that's garbage. and put it in the garbage can. You're the daddy, you're the mama. And what about the television? Sometimes, I don't think it's a sin to have a television. I don't believe that. But we'd better be able to control it. I know some Christians, and if it's you, I don't know this, okay? So I'm not picking on anybody, but some Christians leave the television playing all the time. Background noise. I just think that's crazy, especially if you have kids, because what you're doing is piping in the garbage that's on the TV. You're piping it in. And I don't know, do you get something, even if you're not paying particular attention to it, if you hear that every day, is that going to affect you? I don't want to take that chance with the kids. And so what we do is we make rules. Daddy, listen, you bought the TV, and you know how to get rid of it. If we can't control it, and so you make the rules. If on this television show, and it doesn't matter how deeply we're involved in the plot, if they start talking like this, they start talking filthy, we're going to change the channel or turn it off. Then, right then. If they start doing this sexually, you know, where are you going to, how do you teach your children to live sexually pure lives? How do you keep, I'm not saying to keep sex away from them, I'm saying to keep sex for them. Teenagers, don't give your new husband or wife a big screen TV for a wedding present. Give them something really important. Save yourself for marriage. Now, how are you going to teach your kids that? Well, one way is by saying, we're not going to watch this. And when this comes on TV, we're going to change it right then, or we're going to turn it off. Now, Daddy, if you cannot do that, if you cannot in your house control that, you know how to unplug it and put it out at the curb, right? What about the internet? Oh, don't we need to make some internet rules? I had a class of boys one time between the age of, I think, 10 and 14. And just the boys. I like to teach this class and talk to them about growing up to be real men, what that means. And I use 1 Timothy 3 as my list. Teach them how to be real men. And at one point, this wasn't to trick them, but I just said, when was the first time that y'all looked at pornography? 10 to 14. So we had some 10-year-olds in there and 11-year-olds. The answer is that every boy had a story. And at that age, they trusted me. They didn't mind telling me. They'd tell me. And one of them would say, my friend and I went fishing, and we sat down beside this tree, and there were these pictures down beside the tree. And one boy said, it was at the library. At school, the other boys look at that stuff, and so they don't know how to get it off the computer when the bell rings, and so they come to me because I know about computers, and so I take it off. And there were stories like that. Every boy had a story. That ought to trouble you. If I were the devil, that's what I would do. What I would do is have parents who are naive enough to let that child, any of your children, any of your teenagers, I don't know at what point you're going to graduate them to where they can have a computer device in their room at night alone. I think they need to be about 35. But don't you let your kids in there like that. If I was the devil, I'd reach through that little computer screen, I'd grab their hearts, and I'd addict them. That's happening. And parents are naive enough to not even know what's going on. You make sure you have every password of every device that your children have. And then you tell them, I'm going to check, and you won't know when I'm checking, but I promise you, as your daddy, from time to time, I'm going to open up your computer and I'm going to look at the history and I'll know what you're doing. I don't want you looking at that stuff. No garbage. Do you understand? None of that pornography. None of it. Don't have online devices where the kids have periods of time all by themselves. Put it in a public place. You can use the computer and do your homework at the kitchen table. And there's Mama in there and she's working. And so there's always need to be in a place where they can be seen and they're held accountable, and that's the right thing to do. Let's finish with dating rules. This won't take long. When they get to be the age of dating, and I understand there's a discussion among Christians about whether we should do courting or we should do dating. My humble opinion, and you know what, I'm just one person, is that there's probably a melting together of the two philosophies that hits in the middle and probably is the right way to go between the two. But when your kids get old enough to date, if you please, be sure that you have curfews and know where they're headed. There's just something about accountability if parents know where their kids are going. And the parents set the time that you got to, how late will that concert be? Or what time does the golf course close? Or whatever it is. And you get some handle about what time. And so you're going to go get ice cream, that's great. So I need you home about, and don't make it 1 a.m. You know what? Nothing good happens at 1 a.m. with kids. Yeah, you know I'm right about that, don't you? So you make it an appropriate time and teach them some laws. Here are the rules. Here are the rules, Daddy. Areas of the body that are not for looking are also not for touching. Girls, don't sit in the boy's lap. It's an invitation to promiscuity. Don't go in your boyfriend or girlfriend's bedroom and close the door. Daddy, what if the church people are there? We've got Christians, and all those Christians are there. Oh, I think that's great, but don't you let me see you close the door on that bedroom. Don't you trust me? Oh, honey, of course I trust you. And don't you let me see you have that door closed. I never let my children lock their doors. I let them close. You get to be 13, you have this puberty thing going on, and so they could close their door, but they couldn't lock it. When they were alone. But I wouldn't let them lock it. And I would not, I would respect their privacy. I understand there's a reason, but what I wanted them to know is that I love you more than life, and I'm your daddy, and I can come anytime I want. Just know that I'm your dad. I can come in anytime I want to come in. Respect, love, yes. Parenting, that's right. That's right. The dating rules. Don't go mixed swimming with your boyfriend or girlfriend. I don't know if any of you men have ever been 17 years old and had a girlfriend. I can tell you what, she's already driving you crazy, plumb crazy. And God did that on purpose because He wanted you to get married. He wanted you to. And you ought to do it God's way. Do it all God's way because God, can you hear me, saved His very best for us, for Christians, doing it His way. Not trying to keep sex from you, but to keep sex for you. If you eat your cake today, you'll have a crummy tomorrow. You teach the children that. Teach them about modest apparel. And the girls don't need to be wearing. When Apostle Paul was talking in 1 Timothy 2 about the women should dress in modest apparel, he wasn't talking about going naked. He was talking about some kind of clothing. Now, with reference to the typical bathing suit, even if it's a one-piece bathing suit, but in reference, will you just forgive me for saying this, but in reference to the lower part of her body, the lower half of her body, if that doesn't qualify as being immodest apparel, what do you suppose it would be? How do you suppose you could do it? Don't do that. Teach your children. Don't take your clothes off like that in front of your boyfriend or girlfriend. Don't do that. And sometimes I think naive adults, I don't think the men really think this. They just lie. Women may think this, that we see so much nakedness today that we just don't notice it anymore. There's just so much, I just don't think we notice it. Listen to me. That may be true about some things. I suppose a person could just really love pepperoni pizza, but he could one time eat so much pepperoni pizza that he never more in his whole life wanted any more pepperoni pizza. I used to have a friend, a grown man, and he loved roller coasters, antique roller coasters, the wooden ones, and he would travel around the country just to be able to say, I rode that roller coaster. I've never been a roller coaster man myself, but he was. I suppose, though, that a man could get permission to ride that roller coaster for a whole day. Ride it, just stay on it. Ride it and ride it and ride it and ride it. And I can imagine that at the end of that day, he didn't want to ride that roller coaster anymore. He just got plumb tired of it. But in reference to the subject I'm talking about right now, it is not like that. You don't outgrow it. You don't get to where you don't care about it. And a man is always going to be attracted to the female form. He didn't decide that. It's what God put in him. And for what purpose? And the answer is to draw husbands and wives closer together. And it does that too, doesn't it? And it does that. I know that I've gone over time. I want to tell you that I am grateful for your attention. And God help us. None of us are perfect parents, and I'm certainly not. And I'm not a perfect grandparent either. I'll tell you that right now. What we're going to do is our best, and we're going to pray and pray and pray for God's blessing as we try to bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. And the first thing we're going to teach them is Ephesians 6 and verse 1, where we started tonight. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Always going to be right. Maybe there's somebody here this evening, you've been studying about obeying the gospel, and you know what to do to be saved, and you want to be baptized into Christ. Now would be a great time. It's our custom to sing a song of encouragement and ask people to come down who want to obey the gospel, or perhaps you want the prayers of the church. You're already a Christian, but you need the prayers for one reason or another. Now would be such a fine time. We're going to sing a song of encouragement, and if you'd like to respond, come as we stand and sing.